We're thankful to have our next nominator and nominated author with us tonight. Helen Humphreys is an award-winning author of 5 acclaimed novels. Her last novel, Coventry, was a New York Times Editor's Choice, a Globe and Mail Best Book of the Year, and a finalist for the Trillium Book Award. Her novel, The Lost Garden, was a Canada Reads selection. Her most recent work is Nocturne, a moving memoir both about and for her younger brother, who passed away at the age of 45. The National Post Review, like many others, was effusive in its praise, calling the book a map of sorrow, a precise and poetic illustration of the trajectory of grief via an extended letter. Please welcome Helen Humphreys.
Having trouble with my rose as well. On the first page of your last notebook, you wrote this. So today, Patrick Swayze dies 1.5 years after his initial diagnosis. That maybe gives me until Christmas of 2010. What do I want to do? Finish my compositions, do a recording, maybe too much to ask. Travel, London, New York, and somewhere I've never seen, Paris once more, Prague, Budapest, maybe Asia or Cairo. The only item on that list you got to do was go to New York. We went together. It was October, but it felt like spring. The air held a vein of warmth, and we walked around with our coats undone, sat on the steps of the Met in the late afternoon sun. We had tickets for the opera and the theater. We went to jazz clubs and museums. It was an exhausting schedule, punctuated with worrying bouts of pain that you could no longer pacify with the constant morphine you were taking by then. You and I shared a room as we had often when we were children, and despite the street noise of the city, we slept soundly in our twin beds on the second floor of the hotel. We were both quiet sleepers, waking in the same position that we had fallen asleep in at the same time, and opening our eyes long before we moved our bodies, watching morning seep through the gauzy curtained windows. I had forgotten so many of our childhood similarities. As my younger brother, you had always felt so deeply familiar to me that I didn't even register our sameness. When you first got your dire diagnosis of pancreatic cancer at the end of July, we laughed. Can you believe it, you said? I'm stage 4B and there is no stage 4C. You were meant to have lived into the spring, but you died just weeks after we got back from New York. Despite the list titled Things to Do Before I Die, you didn't even have time to stop your life enough to absorb fully what was happening to you. You had a full schedule of teaching piano on the day you went into hospital for the emergency operation that killed you. Stopping a life is harder than it seems, especially a life in full flight. It takes at least 3 months to bring the whole shuddering freight of obligation and expectation to a halt. But for now, you are not dead. It's the end of October, and we're sitting outside at the Lincoln Center. We have tickets for Aida tonight, and beforehand, we are watching a matinee performance of South Pacific. It's intermission, and we're eating the sandwiches we bought at the deli where we had breakfast. The sandwiches are already stale, but we're eating them anyway. You are smoking. Since the diagnosis, you have taken up smoking again. One of the saddest things in your apartment when I went to clean it out after you died was your pack of half-smoked cigarettes with the small blue Bic lighter tucked down the front, the equipment of our youth. South Pacific was not something either of us had wanted to see. We were there because it fit into our schedule for the day. But the moment the first act started, we turned to each other and said at the same time, "This is really good." So much of theater and writing and music is somber, elegiac, the backwards glance, the lovers locked together in the airless tomb. And while this is acceptable when life is good, all that tragedy is hard on someone who is dying. The brightness of South Pacific cheered us, and at intermission we sat outside and talked about how we didn't want to participate anymore in art that was depressing. Because life is so good, you said. We should just celebrate it. Thank you.
Helen, thank you so much for the power of your work and your words. The jury summed it up thus. Humphreys explores how the lens of a death may alter life and filter memory, a distillation of grief. The prose is vivid and intimate, transforming her emotion of her brother's death into a profound experience for the reader. Thank you for sharing that with us tonight and teaching us all about living through loss. The book is published by HarperCollins Canada.